We just wrapped up our semi-annual reviews for the beginning of the year. Typically, we have two. We have one towards the beginning of the year and one towards the end of the year. And during this session, we generally cover things like required minimum distributions, cash flow needs, rebalancing opportunities, tax opportunities before the deadline, tax opportunities for the year ahead, and just overall each client's individual retirement planning outlook. But obviously this past quarter, we've had some pretty significant volatility relative to what we've seen over the past couple of years, really since 2022 when inflation topped out at 9.1%. But there was some really great takeaways that I wanted to share in hopes that it will help you in your journey to plan for and execute a successful retirement. Thank you for joining for another episode of the Planning for Retirement podcast. My name is Kevin Lau. I am your host. And I'm also the owner and lead financial planner at Imagine Financial Security. We help individuals over 50 who have at least $1 million saved maximize their retirement spending, minimize their lifetime tax bill, and worry less about the financial markets. If that describes you, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as follow our podcast wherever you consume podcasts. We put out weekly retirement-related content specifically designed for you, who I like to call PFR Nation. And if you're interested in learning more about working with our firm one-on-one, you can visit our website at www.imaginefinancialsecurity.com, or you can start with the retirement readiness questionnaire that is linked in the description of this episode. But before we dive in, just wanted to wish an early happy anniversary to my beautiful bride, Jessica, officially on April 30th. This is going to be number 9 for us. And just so happens to fall in our Hilton Head reunion. My wife's family does a family reunion there every year and typically falls towards the end of April, early May. But this particular one, we're going to be in Hilton Head for our anniversary. So super excited. It's probably one of our favorite places to be. I'm a Gamecock at heart, went to University of South Carolina. So I love going to the Palmetto State. And so super pumped about that. But we also just took a trip down to Florida. We spent the last week in Jacksonville, Florida, visiting some family, friends, and of course, also visiting our clients. So, 90% of our meetings are held over Zoom, but we do have the ability to meet in person, whether you're in Jacksonville, Florida, or in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. We have offices in both of those locations, but we've been just crazy busy doing a lot of these Zoom meetings and doing a lot of our in-person client reviews. And now we're kind of coming into the summer. Things are going to get a little bit busy for my family personally, just because we're going to be going through another move. We moved obviously from Jacksonville, Florida to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we decided to rent for a year. I wanted to get a lay of the land of the area. Obviously, my wife hasn't lived here in over 20 years. So she doesn't, totally different city than when she grew up here. But I wanted to get a little bit of a lay of the land before we decided to buy a home, which we ended up buying a house, and we will be moving in May. So we've got a lot going on with our family this summer. So I say all that because the YouTube Whiteboard Fireside Chat's going to be a little bit of on a hiatus over the last couple of weeks, and even probably next week as well, because, we had our trip to Florida, we have our Hilton Head trip, and we've got a move upcoming. But I'm going to try to pick those back up towards the end of May, potentially early June. But the podcast, we're going to continue keeping that rolling on a weekly basis. But anyways, like I said, there were some great takeaways from this wave of reviews. All right. And first of all, it was nice to have these meetings during these times. I think it's a little bit unfortunate sometimes when we're not in review season and we have some crazy things going on in the market. So it actually was very timely to get ahead of a lot of these conversations during these annual or semi-annual reviews with our clients. But listen, there's no way to really sugarcoat this. Trump pretty much dominated a lot of the review conversations, or at least the current administrative policies dominated things like DOGE or tariffs or Fed interest rates or inflation or the border, et cetera. And whether or not you like Trump, I cannot name another president or just political leader in general that moves the markets like Trump. And you've heard me talk about tariffs, okay, which is obviously one of the major policy issues that is really moving the markets. Typically, it's been moving them on a downward trend. But I believe that I've talked about tariffs before. I believe that the tariffs were a negotiating tactic, or at least in part, okay? I do believe we're going to have tariffs in effect going forward. I don't think tariffs were just totally for negotiating. I do believe that the goal is to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but not all of it. It's going to be, I think, virtually impossible just to bring all manufacturing back to the U.S. But certainly the tariffs on China, I believe this was one of those things that this is a full-blown trade war, and tariff rates, in China, upwards of 140%. But lo and behold, Trump announced today that he's considering reducing the China tariff to de-escalate the trade war. And look what happened. The markets rallied. Now, again, I'm recording this on April 23rd, so I'm sure more is going to happen over the next week. But it's just kind of a reminder to not make knee-jerk reactions based on what Trump says. Okay. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing on both sides, the sell side and also the buy side. So just be cautious on that. And because if you guess wrong, okay, if you are wrong in your trade, you could potentially lose tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even millions of dollars, depending on your portfolio size. Okay. So with that as a backdrop, I think the first thing that I took away was, yes, we had a lot of market volatility, but I'm not going to say there was no panic, but I do believe the clients that we've been working with, especially that have been with us for, let's say, 5 years, 10 years plus, they've seen the ups and downs in the markets and they know our process. They know the dirt, the discipline, unemotional, repeatable process we have. So I didn't really sense that there was a lot of panic in the markets. There were definitely some concerns, especially after Liberation Day on April 2nd, the markets were selling off 4 or 5% on a daily basis for several days. But I just believe that there was a sense of calm because our clients have a financial plan in place. And part of that financial planning process is dedicating specific cash flow buckets for those income needs during periods of volatility. And I've talked about this before with the fixed income side, having a specific number of years dedicated in assets that are not correlated to stocks really helps. Okay. And it just gives them that peace of mind that we're not having to make any sort of fire sale on the equity side during these periods of volatility. If anything, we want to be buying into stocks. Okay. But I think that first thing was my overarching takeaway was yes, there was volatility. There was a lot of panic in the media. The VIX, I talked about the VIX hit upwards of 50, okay, which is one of the highest levels we've seen since 2008, 2009 during the Great Recession. So it's just telling you that there was a lot of fear in the markets, but our clients they were not panicking. Okay. I even had one of our nervous clients that I've been working with for 10 years now. And we've been through several ups and downs, 2018 in the fourth quarter, 2020 in the first quarter, 2022, of course, and now 2025. But ultimately, I didn't get a sense that he was even panicking. He even emailed me and said, "Hey, Kevin, I know you're probably getting slammed with calls during these volatile times. And thankfully, I'm not feeling panicky, but I'm just kind of curious to hear what your takeaway is and ultimately what you're doing for my portfolio." So we exchanged some nice emails. But it was just nice to kind of see our coaching paying off for our clients and that, hey, listen, the media is going to sell you on something and they're going to sell the daily volatility, especially during these times of uncertainty. And they're going to just lean into that because they know if it bleeds, it leads. And so having our clients share with us that they're not panicking and they are confident in the long-term plan really was a great takeaway for me as number one. Number two, we had some clients talk a little bit about some market timing, okay? Really on two sides. The first side is the obvious. The question was, should we get more defensive? Should we move more to fixed income? But I think it was definitely calming for folks when we sort of reiterated, hey, you know what? Actually, at the beginning of the year in 2025, we rebalanced your portfolio. We took some of the gains from equities and we rebalanced into the fixed income side. So we've already added fixed income to your portfolio before this period of volatility. Not that we had a crystal ball thinking, hey, the market's going to crash on April 2nd, when Trump's Liberation Day kicks off. We didn't have that crystal ball, nor do we have one currently. But ultimately, we have a plan, we have a process, and we've already added some of that fixed income exposure. And really what was awesome to hear from actually one of our clients was the exact opposite. He's been coached so well over the years. He actually said, hey, Kevin, Roberto, I'm actually thinking I've got this fixed income in a 403B and this annuity over here that's only earning me 3%. Maybe it makes sense for me to move out of that fixed income and add it to my IRA that we're managing on his behalf that's a little bit more aggressive and ultimately buying up equities at discounted prices. So we implemented that for him. So it was actually kind of cool to see our clients actually put into practice a lot of what we teach them around this disciplined, unemotional, repeatable process. And instead of running for the hills during periods of volatility, looking at those as a buying opportunity. So the timing piece, not that we're saying, hey, we're going to try to time the market and buy the dip. That's not what I'm talking about. But more so, hey, you know what? Equities have pulled back 15% at this point in time when we had this conversation with him. He doesn't have a big need for a lot of his portfolio. His rate of withdrawal is less than 2% a year. Okay, he can afford to be a little bit more aggressive to maximize the legacy for his son. And his son has multiple children, I think 7 kids. And so they want to leave as much money as possible to him and his children. And so therefore, they can afford to be a little more aggressive given their rate of withdrawal, given they have healthy pension and also healthy Social Security payments coming in. But sort of looking at this as a buying opportunity was one of the takeaways that I had as number two. Number three, sort of related to number one, was delegation during this time frame. I think really helped provide a lot of that peace of mind. Okay, I think one of the feedbacks was like, hey, Kevin, Roberto, it's so great that I don't have to worry about pulling the trigger on trading. Like I know in my mind, hey, I probably should be doing this, but oftentimes it can be a little unnerving, especially when the market's moving 4%, 5%, both sides on a daily basis. It's very stressful to be doing this, especially when our clients are approaching retirement or have recently retired. Very, very stressful to pull the trigger on trades. And so I think that delegation and sort of having our team worry about this for them. This is partly why I have so many gray hairs relative to when, let's say 7 or 8 years ago when I started my firm, or 5 years ago, I should say, when I started my own firm. But ultimately, our clients are paying us to worry about this for them. And so I think that delegation kind of helped our clients sort of pay attention to the news, but knowing that they have a team on the back end that's going to be handling the trading for them, that's specifically designed for their retirement plan and their financial plan. I think that was very calming during this past period of volatility. And again, I think that's why that also correlates directly with the number one point I made earlier. Number four, I think this was a big one, is really giving our clients perspective on performance. Okay, because it's very easy. Like I said, the media likes to lean into this and they like to look at the daily swings. But when you really zoom out and look, okay, even year to date, during the worst period of time, let's say middle of April, when the markets had sold off about 15 to 20% roughly, depending on what index you were looking at, our client portfolios, let's say a balanced portfolio, wasn't down very much, maybe 8% or 7%. So if you kind of zoom out on this one, it actually wasn't even that bad year to date or quarter to date. And then even if you take into account the last 12 months and the last 24 months, our clients are like, oh my gosh, like if we look at this thing in 2023 and 2024, the last 2 years, we've earned far more money than we actually took out. Even if our clients were taking out, let's say 4%, 5%, or 6% rate of withdrawal, they were earning more in their portfolio over the last couple of years. So they've actually built up a little bit of a buffer over and above that principal balance that they had going into 2023. So they kind of zooming out and sort of like not necessarily focusing in on those daily market movements because during periods of volatility, that can be very, very stressful. It can be very unnerving. And that could cause you to make a decision that you're going to regret in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line. So I think that perspective on performance matters a lot. So when you're reviewing performance, don't look at the last quarter even, or even the last month. Look over the last 12 months, look over the last 24 months, or even the last 5 years. If you look over the last 5 years, our clients' balance sheets have substantially grown. Okay, yes, we had 2022, which was a downturn. We had the beginning of 2025. But for the most part, we've had some pretty significant positive growth in the markets, especially on the equity side. And so our clients' net worths and their balance sheets have been pretty healthily, steadily growing over the last 5 years. And I think that really also helped calm some of those nerves that were kind of getting a little bit jittery over the last few weeks. Number five, we had some cash flow increases. Okay. And so, of course, required minimum distributions, the way those work is that's going to be calculated based on your life expectancy. So if you're over the beginning date for RMDs or required minimum distributions, for most of you, that'll be either 73 or 75, depending on your year of birth. But most of the time, you'll kind of see a slight raise in your distribution when it comes to like a percentage of your portfolio. And the reason is because your life expectancy is shortening by 1 year. And so therefore, the calculation that the IRS life expectancy table uses will cause you to take out a slightly higher percentage of your portfolio each and every year. So in the beginning, when you're, let's say 73, 74, it's less than 4%. But then when you're in, let's say in your mid 80s, it could top out at 8.5%, 9% of your portfolio. On top of that, we had significant gains in the portfolio, especially on the equity side in 2024. So if you couple the life expectancy calculation plus market growth, which again, the RMD, the required minimum distribution calculation, is based on the end of calendar year balance. So on December 31st, when the market closes, that's what they use to calculate those minimum distributions for the following year. So RMDs, of course, that is a mandatory raise into 2025 for all of our clients. However, even for clients that were not taking out required minimum distributions, we did see a pretty significant jump in the number of folks that requested an increase in their cash flow. And I think this just sort of aligns with a lot of the sentiment in the market right now, which is inflation being sticky. The cost of groceries, the cost of just lifestyle, insurance premiums. A lot of our clients are in Florida. Insurance has gone up significantly, especially homeowners insurance coverage. Auto insurance gone up significantly. Vehicles, clients that have been purchasing cars, new or used, have gone up pretty substantial over the last couple of years. So we definitely had a pretty significant uptick in the number of folks requesting increasing cash flows. But again, we've got a good plan for it. And as long as it was built into the buffer of the portfolio, we're good to go on that one. All right, number 6, we had a client move closer to grandchildren. Okay. Their daughter and grandkids, they both lived in Florida, but they decided to pack up, move from the East Coast to the West Coast in Florida. And so I think that the takeaway here that I have was, it's just kind of a reminder that like the housing decision of retirement is oftentimes fluid for individuals. Okay. Especially for those of you that are wanting to be near your grandkids. Sometimes you might have adult children that are not 100% stable in a particular location. Maybe they're there for a short-term job, or maybe they're kind of serial movers. They're never happy with where they're living, so they just continue to find new cities and they keep moving. Okay, so I just kind of throw that out there because if you are planning to try to move and be as close as possible to grandkids, just kind of know that your living situation needs to be a little bit fluid, and you need to take into consideration the potential cost of moving. Okay, because certainly they were not expecting to have to sell their house during this market. It's not really a seller's market right now on the real estate side. It's definitely turning a little bit more into a buyer's market. So yes, they got a pretty good deal on the house that they purchased, but they ended up selling their property for a lot less than what they were expecting to sell their property for. So they did have to get a little creative and come up with some cash to put for a down payment and create a little bit of a bridge loan until they ultimately sold their house on the East Coast of Florida. All right, number 7 takeaway. We had a client officially retire during this period of volatility. It was a little unnerving, a little scary for him. And actually, he hired us last year because he was planning for an ultimate retirement within 12 months. Okay. He wanted to get a pulse check on, hey, is this doable? Ran the numbers, created a great financial plan for him. We said, yes, this is doable. Here's what we need to do from a cash flow standpoint. Here's what we need to do for Social Security. Here's what we need to do for your investment portfolio. So we had a great plan, but ultimately we did not expect for him to retire during this period of uncertainty. And it was definitely a little unnerving, a little scary, but a few things that definitely played in his favor that he was able to take advantage of. Number 1, he had a pretty nice little cash buffer in the bank. Okay. So I think this was really good that he sort of went into this mindset of like, okay, let me have about 6 to 12 months of cash flow needs in the bank. And he sort of has been staying in that range. And that's definitely given a little bit of peace of mind. Okay. Because he has not started Social Security income yet. He does plan to delay Social Security as long as possible, perhaps until 70. He's currently 65. So one thing we did, so he's not relying 100% of it on his portfolio for cash flow needs. He's got that cash on hand, but he also has fixed income in his portfolio to generate additional cash flows. But then lastly, what we did is we created an annuity for part of his assets. Okay. So his situation, he doesn't have massive legacy goals. He does have a son. He wants to leave a little bit to him, but that's not his primary goal. He wants to enjoy his retirement. He wants to maximize spending and enjoyment and fulfillment during this life chapter. But he also didn't want 100% of his income to come from non-guaranteed sources. And given the fact that Social Security was going to be kicked down the road, probably at least 2 years, potentially 5 years, what we did is we created an annuity stream with part of his assets. He has some non-qualified, non-retirement assets that we turn into a guaranteed annuity stream. And the payout rate was upwards of about 7% annually. So pretty attractive there, and also very, very tax efficient, because ultimately that cash flow that income stream is going to be spreading out those gains in the portfolio over the course of his lifetime, as opposed to just if you were to take that out as a lump sum. But again, the delaying Social Security, he's over 62, so he could pull the trigger at any point in time. If things got really ugly and we went through a prolonged downturn or even a bear market, he could decide to start taking Social Security, and that way he can reduce his rate of withdrawal on his investments. But I think we've got a really good plan in terms of taking the cash flow needs that he needs to supplement that annuity income source, but also that cash buffer. The bond buffer has really played into his favor. We also, number 8, I'm going to transition directly into number 8. We also took advantage for him and also all of our other clients that have taxable accounts with us. There were a lot of opportunities for tax loss harvesting. Okay. Yes, the markets were pretty positive in 2023 and 2024, but we do have clients that are adding more money to their portfolio on a go-forward basis. So there were opportunities to do some tax loss harvesting, not only on the equity side, but even on the bond side. Okay. And so what's key about this one is if you missed that window, which was really in the middle of April, roughly, a lot of the sell-off has been recovered. Okay. Now, granted, I am recording this a week before this is coming out roughly. So maybe we have more volatility in the downturn and we're going to be looking for those opportunities going forward. But it's one of those things like if you just bury your head in the sand, which is oftentimes better than going through a fire sale during a downturn. But if you kind of bury your head in the sand, you could miss out on those tax loss harvesting opportunities because once those prices recover, then you have fewer losses that you could take advantage of that would then offset some of those gains in that current year or future years, or even use to offset ordinary income up to $3,000 annually. But there were a lot of tax loss harvesting opportunities, more so than we've seen really since 2022. So really, really excited that we took advantage of those for our clients during April. On that same line, there were some gain harvesting opportunities for some of our clients that had some significant exposure to certain asset classes or even singular stocks that they weren't super comfortable with. Okay. One worked for, has stock that's issued by the employer that he works for. And ultimately that stock has now represented a pretty large percentage of his overall portfolio, pushing 35-40%. And so that was very, very concerning for him as they approach retirement, which is probably going to be in about 1 to 2 years, depending on some factors there. So we were able to take advantage of some of those gain harvesting opportunities at lower prices. So therefore is a lower tax impact to those clients. And we're able to reinvest and diversify that portfolio a little bit more. So during these times of volatility, look for those opportunities where you could either sell at a loss, use that loss to offset gains, or use to reduce your ordinary income, or take some of the opportunities where maybe some of those asset prices have come down. Whereas before, if you sold that asset, pretty significant tax liability, where now the tax liability has come down a little bit so you can take advantage of some of those gain harvesting opportunities. And again, reinvest into a more diversified portfolio that suits your needs as you approach and execute a successful retirement. Number 10 was a little bit about lifetime gifting. So we've got a couple of elderly clients that are healthy still, but they're kind of in that slow go year process. They're not doing a lot of the travel anymore. And, one in particular, has a pretty healthy Social Security payment, pretty healthy pension, and is also taking required minimum distributions. And over the last few years, we've been taking 100% out of those required minimum distributions and either giving some to charity via the qualified charitable distribution or reinvesting back in to her taxable brokerage account. Okay. But she has 2 adult children, two daughters. And what she's decided to do per our financial planning discussions and this idea of giving with a warm hand versus a cold one, her ultimate investment goal is to leave money to her daughters. So, her daughters are in their late 40s, early 50s. And so they're kind of in that approaching for retirement phase as well. So per our financial planning discussions, she's decided to implement an annual giving strategy to both of her adult daughters. And the maximum she can give to each of her daughters is $19,000 per year. So we're going to take some of those RMDs that she's otherwise reinvesting back into the brokerage account that's going to go to her daughters anyways. And she's going to max out that annual gift to each of them and give them each $19,000 because it's more likely they're going to need it now versus 15 or 20 years down the road when she ultimately might pass away. Now, she could pass away tomorrow. No one has a crystal ball on that one, but ultimately the life expectancy is on her side and she is very healthy relative to her age, which is about 83. Another takeaway here is we've got a client with an adult child who they are supporting. Okay. He lives with them and has been for a while, has some PTSD with his time in the military. And he's not able to hold a full-time job right now. So he is on Social Security income because of this mental cognitive disability. And, kind of thinking through what their estate plan is going to look like is a challenge right now because, she's got another son that they do have a living trust set up that would minister and administer the trust, but they want to figure out a way to provide some additional funds directly to their son who needs the support, needs the help without jeopardizing his ability to receive that Social Security income payment. Okay, so this is a complexity that's going to be a little bit ongoing right now. A few strategies that we have in mind is a special needs trust, number one. That's a potential option. But another option is to potentially just leave him an annuity income stream. Okay, now ultimately they have this annuity that right now the husband is not annuitizing anything. He's just letting it sit. He's had this annuity for many, many years. And it's a variable annuity. So it has actually grown quite nicely over the last decade or so. But ultimately, one of the decisions there is potentially to annuitize that upon their passing so that their son who needs the income has a guaranteed income source and it doesn't have just full access to a large chunk of funds. Again, they do have a living trust that will become an irrevocable trust at their death. But again, one of the concerns is the brother may not be in a position to be the bad cop, to say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to allow you to receive income payments, or I'm going to limit what you're doing with your trust. That's a little bit dicey for them. So instead of doing that, again, the special needs trust is a potential option to allow him to still qualify for some of those Social Security income benefits, because there are some income and asset level testing that is done to continue to qualify for Social Security income. But another option is to potentially leave that annuity to him and essentially force that beneficiary, force their son to turn that into a life income stream upon their passing. That could be a potential play for them at some point down the road. But I think I bring this up because I think a lot of folks out there, a lot of you out there, PFR Nation, you may have some adult children that you are supporting, okay? And maybe it's because of a disability. Maybe it's because they're just not on their feet yet. They need some help and some challenges. So I do believe really thinking through your estate plan and thinking through some of the complexities of your estate plan with your financial planner is so critical, because they can help guide you with that attorney when it makes sense to engage with the attorney. What assets do you want to potentially leave to your children versus spend during your lifetime? Or potentially some of the complexities around, okay, if you leave a certain asset level or a certain income level to a specific beneficiary, how does that impact things like Social Security income or some of those other government benefits that they otherwise could have received had they not received those assets outright? So very, very critical to continuously review and update your estate plan based on life changing over time and your family dynamics changing. All right, number 12, last but not least, and this one is super exciting, super fun, is the go-go years for a lot of our clients can last well into their 80s, and they could for you as well. All right, so we have several clients that are taking some amazing trips. They're traveling a ton, and a lot of them, some of them are in their 80s. All right, and they're still doing it. So, I think for this one, number one is obviously genetics play a role, but certainly physical activity, mental stimulation, having purpose in retirement, all that kind of plays into good health in retirement. But also when you're budgeting long term, a lot of times you might meet with your financial planner or talk to your financial planner, and they might kind of have, this idea of, okay, your go-go years are going to be in your, let's say your 60s, maybe your early 70s, and then you start to slow it down a little bit in your 70s and 80s. I don't know if that's necessarily the case for everybody. Okay. Now, certainly with our clients, they're still doing a lot of that go-go year travel into their 80s. So I guess take that into consideration however you plan. Okay. Again, I'm not going to tell you what to do and tell you how to budget, but I think sort of being a little bit conservative in your assumptions is probably going to help you, because worst case scenario, maybe you're not doing those trips, but maybe you have that cash flow budgeted for. Maybe you can do some annual gifting to charity or your family members, or just reinvest back into your portfolio. No one's forcing you to spend it. But I think on the flip side is, if you plan to drop your spending at, let's say 70, but you get to 70 and you want to continue to ramp up spending because you want to do some trips and you're still healthy to do so, and you didn't budget for it, that could cause some challenges. That could put a little pressure on your portfolio because you didn't plan for that properly over the last 5, 10, 15 years. Okay. So again, the definitions of go-go years, slow-go years, and no-go years are going to vary based on your personal circumstances and, of course, your health situation. So just keep that in mind as you plan for retirement. All right, that's it for today's episode, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, remember, reminder just to follow along the podcast and share this with someone else that you think is a PFR Nation caliber individual, okay? Because I guarantee they're going to find a lot of value in the content we're putting out. And again, if you are finding value in what we've been doing, if you've been a listener for a little while, please consider leaving a 5-star review on either Apple or Spotify. It really helps the engagement. It helps us reach more people. It impacts more people, which is ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. And again, stay tuned for next week's episode. I'm going to talk about the number one most versatile account as you plan for retirement. Until next week, this is Kevin Lau signing off.